What if the most famous artist in history was also a secret inventor whose radical designs could have changed the world centuries ago? Beyond the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci's notebooks hide a treasure trove of forgotten contraptions that are shockingly brilliant. Prepare to discover the visionary mind behind devices that were truly ahead of their time. Forget everything you thought you knew about Leonardo da Vinci. We're about to expose the hidden genius of a man who didn't just paint masterpieces, but engineered inventions so advanced they'd make modern scientists blush. Get ready to see the true scale of his radical brilliance and why his forgotten contraptions could have reshaped history as we know it. Imagine a world where helicopters flew in the Schuith century, or robots assisted medieval craftsmen. That's not science fiction, but a tantalizing glimpse into the alternate history Da Vinci's lost inventions could have created. Join us as we unlock the secrets of his forgotten notebooks, revealing the audacious designs that were simply too visionary for their own time. So here's the central question we're going to answer today. If Leonardo's buried machines had leapt from ink to iron, how different would our world be? And what do these rediscovered pages reveal about the restless mind that dreamed them? You open a codex. The paper is thin and faintly crinkles, the ink browned by centuries. On a single page, a blur of tiny script runs backwards, right to left, like a secret river flowing uphill. Next to it, a tangle of gears, wings, pulleys, and human limbs, precise, confident, alive. This is not a painter's idle doodle. It's a laboratory on paper. Leonardo's notebooks, the Codex Atlanticus, the Codex Arundel, the Codex on the Flight of Birds, the Madrid codices, the Codex Leicester, are an ocean of thought. Thousands of pages scattered across time and Europe, written in mirror script, inked by a left-handed hand that refused to smudge, and guarded by riddles, shorthand, and an almost playful secrecy. He didn't keep a diary, he kept a universe. Why did so much of it remain hidden? Because after his death in Icen-Wu-by-Di-Serjol, his papers migrated, fragmented, and slept. They passed from his devoted pupil, Francesco Melzi, into the hands of heirs who didn't grasp their weight. Sheets were traded, torn, pasted into albums. Some resurfaced centuries later, 2 codices silently resting in the National Library of Spain, rediscovered in the Icen-Wu-by-Di-Serjol after being lost in their own catalog. Others vanished forever. What remained was enough to stagger us, and the ideas inside. They push against the edges of the Schuith century like a tide. Leonardo did not enter the courts of princes as a painter. He entered as a war engineer. Listen to his own bold audition to the Duke of Milan. I can build portable bridges. I can divert rivers. I can make cannons, mortars, armored vehicles. Only at the end did he add, oh, and I can paint. You consider his armored car. A looming iron shell, sloped and riveted, studded with cannons around its circumference. Inside, a team of men works cranks linked by gears to drive the beast forward. A moving fortress. The concept is simple to us now. It was almost unthinkable then. And there's a twist. In the sketch, the gearing is drawn in reverse, so the wheels would turn opposite one another, and the machine would fail. Was it a mistake? Or a deliberate misdirection to keep prying eyes from turning his ideas into horror? Into horror? He rarely does, for the organ gun. He never tells us. He rarely does. Next to it, a fan of barrels, the organ gun. Rows of smaller cannon clustered on a carriage like the pipes of a church organ. While one tier cools, another fires. A third reloads. A mechanical rhythm of death designed to sweep a battlefield with shrapnel and shock. He drew field fortifications too, angled bastions that force attackers into crossfire, zigzagging trenches, subterranean mines, and sally ports for surprise sorties. He devised collapsible bridges to advance, and steel claws to tear down the enemies. He was not a man out of the world. He was a man responding to it, to the brutal, treacherous reality of Renaissance warfare. And yet that same mind climbed into the sky. In Florence, in Milan, in a room littered with bird wings and sketches, he began to sketch the impossible flight. He studied swallows and kites. He wrote a small, astonishing book on the flight of birds. He built models, tested feathers, wrote equations without numbers. The ornithopter, a human suspended beneath vast wings, feet pumping, arms pulling, pulleys tightening, the machine beating the air like a living thing. The helical air screw, a linen spiral, stiffened and stretched, twirling to screw itself upward, imagining air as a sea that could be gripped like water. He even drafted a parachute, a pyramidal tent of linen, proportioned with care, designed to let a man plunge from a high tower and touch the earth unbroken. 5 centuries later, someone tried it. It worked. He came as close to flight as a man could without engines, without aluminum, without carbon fiber. He lacked the materials. He did not lack the vision. So, what if? What if the Duke of Milan had poured treasure into that armored car and rolled it onto the Lombard plain? What if Florence had funded a school of flight and apprentices launched gliders from Tuscan hills? How would Italy, how would Europe have shifted? The presence of mobile armor would have shattered the calculus of siege and field battle. Cities built for stone confrontations would face armored thunder. Fortification geometry might have evolved faster, tactics rerouted, armies reorganized around engines and crews. And if some aristocratic daredevil had glided from a cliff and lived to tell it, the skies might have opened a century early. Imagine it. Scouts from the air, maps redrawn with aerial eyes, the myth of a strictly earthbound man broken in the Renaissance itself. Would the age of discovery have leapt from sea to sky? Or would power have clamped down on these machines out of fear? Leonardo's notebooks don't answer, but they invite the question, and once you've asked it, you can't unask it. And, it wasn't all blood and thunder. His sketchbooks are cluttered with miracles for ordinary days, inventions meant to amuse, to assist, to astonish. There is a self-propelled cart, wound with coiled springs like the muscles of a crouching cat. Release the tension and the cart sprints forward. Set pegs in a drum and it turns as it runs, a programmable path drawn in wood and iron. Built centuries later from his drawing, it worked. Imagine the theater scenes this could have animated in his time. Moving scenery gliding of its own accord, jaws dropping in candlelit halls. There is a mechanical knight. Cables for tendons, pulleys for joints, a chest full of gears, armor masking anatomy. In a ducal pageant, this figure stands, sits, raises its arms, opens its jaw. A machine in human shape, not to replace humans, but to make them gasp. A century when the border between the miraculous and the mechanical was thin, and Leonardo loved to dance on it. There are playful wonders. A mechanical lion that walks across a French court and opens its chest to release lilies. Dazzling a king. A rolling odometer that counts distance with falling pebbles. An adjustable spanner. Ball bearings sketched before industry could mass produce them. A double-hulled ship, safety imagined in secret compartments. A diving apparatus sketched for the Venetian arsenal. Leather suit and breathing tubes, meant to sabotage enemy ships from below the waterline. Practical, dangerous, daring. Then he turns his relentless eye on the most complex machine he knows, the human body. Remember the smell, he wrote about it. Night after night, he visited hospitals, then anatomical theaters, then back rooms where the air was heavy and still. He dissected to learn, to draw, to reveal. He watched an old man die gently and, moved by curiosity and compassion, he opened him to discover why. He sketched skulls with measurements like blueprints, sinews spiraling like ropes, the unborn child in a uterus drawn with simple holiness. But it is the heart that haunts him. He cuts open ox hearts, makes transparent models of arteries, pours water seeded with grass to see flows and eddies. He sees what almost no one else has seen, that blood does not simply slam shut the valves, but that vortices spin in sinuses behind them, closing the leaflets with a graceful swirl. He draws it, writes it, and then the knowledge sleeps for centuries, until modern cardiology finds what he found in a cold room with an ox heart and a bowl. He sketches tools because tools let him see more. He designs calipers for bones, dilating devices to hold tissues safely apart, and methods to inject wax into the ventricles to understand space. He is not simply watching. He is experimenting, building, modeling, doing science before science has agreed what its method is. He's dreaming of lenses that correct vision, not by cutting the eye, but by altering the curve of the cornea. immersing the eye in a bowl of water to feel how refraction changes what we see, a line of thought that centuries later blossoms into contact lenses. He plays with the camera obscura to understand how images paint themselves on a retina. For him, the body is a workshop, and drawing is the most powerful instrument in it. These designs do not sit apart from his art. They feed it. His hands move between gears and muscles, and each perfects the other. The man who paints the skin over the bones of the Saint Jerome knows where each tendon lies. The man who draws a turban of air under a flywheel knows how to make a cloud's edge lean into the wind in the background of a painting. In his mind, the hinge of a knee and the hinge of a door are cousins. Nature is a network of analogies. If you understand one, you can borrow its genius for another. On the page, his process is intimate. He writes in mirror script, whether to protect ideas or to protect his ink. He annotates with arrows and jokes, fingers pointing at errors and improvements, notes curling around images like ivy. He adds multiple views, profile, plans, section, as if turning the object over in his hand and letting us watch. He doesn't just show you a machine, he teaches you how to think it into being. Cross sections reveal guts. Cutaways show how chains snake. Exploded diagrams display the secret choreography of parts. His inventing a visual language of engineering as he invents the machines themselves, and yet so much stayed on paper. Why? Because the world he lived in was not ready. Not in metal, not in money, not in mind. Iron was heavy and inconsistent. Spring steel snapped. Milling tolerances were dreams, not reality. The bearings he drew could not be ground to the smoothness they required. Gunpowder was corrosive and fickle. Light engines were centuries away. No steam, no gasoline, only muscle and wind. Patronage was precarious. Princes wanted weapons now, not blueprints that led to a decade of trial and failure. The church was not uniformly suppressive, but suspicion bubbled around anatomical theaters and pagan cravings to fly. And Leonardo himself was a hurricane. He chased 100 comets at once. He recorded everything. He finished little. That is not a flaw. It is the price of breadth, so the revolution remained unfinished. But unfinished does not mean lost. Over time, the world caught up to him. Look around. Tanks grind across muddy battlefields in the early first century. Lo, armored, turreted machines that echo a drawing on a Renaissance page. Helicopters claw at the sky, their rotors whirling like the linen spirals of a thought in Florence. Parachutes bloom like canvas flowers, saving lives with geometry he intuited. Diving suits become scuba rigs. Robots assemble and amuse. Ball bearings spin beneath everything that spins. The visual grammar of exploded diagrams and cutaway sections is the engineer's mother tongue. His vortices in the heart become part of medical school. He is everywhere, not because he built these things, but because he built a way of seeing them. And yet the tantalizing question remains, if Leonardo's patrons had chosen differently, if the technical gaps were narrower, if a handful of prototypes had lived, how would that world look today? Imagine an Italy where flying is not myth but artisan practice. Guilds of airwrights filling notebooks with feathers and fabric, swapping risks and routes. Rail-thin gliders lifting from coastal cliffs into sea breezes while below, Venetian divers in leather suits sabotage enemy hulls. Skilled crews staffing armored cars designed not to terrorize peasants, but to break feudal stalemates, ushering in standing armies built around engineering schools rather than mercenary companies. City defenses redesigned with mathematics a century before Galileo stands trial. No Storks. In Florence, young artists apprentice not only with pigments but with pulleys. A dual education, draw this tendon, then carve this gear. Innovation as a civic virtue, not a courtly party trick. Could earlier flight have accelerated mapping, communications, even meteorology? Might a culture of experiment have rippled outward from these machines into medicine more forcefully, pushing anatomy onto printed pages and into classrooms? Sooner? And here's the darker thread, would a Europe clutching armored vehicles and aerial scouts have burned itself earlier and hotter, channeling genius into war for another generation? Leonardo's drawings are neutral. We are not. we do with them what we are. But this is what his pages ultimately offer us, a bridge between imagination and mechanism, between awe and analysis. On one side, a painter rolling a little sphere across a table to see how it casts light, then painting a cheekbone as if that same light had kissed it 2 minutes ago. On the other, an engineer watching air behave like a fluid and designing a screw to climb a sky we cannot touch. He treated air like water, water like muscle, muscle like rope, rope like tendon. He made metaphors into machines. Return to the notebooks and look closer, you'll see patterns. He never draws a single wheel. He draws the system that encloses it, the purpose that moves it. He tests on paper. He tests again. He gives his devices a kind of anatomy, and he gives anatomy a kind of engineering. Threads become veins. Veins become channels. A canal around a city becomes a vein around a heart. He keeps asking the same question in different languages. How does this move? And why? And what else moves like it? We tend to separate the man, Leonardo the painter, Leonardo the inventor, Leonardo the anatomist. He refused that separation. He lived in the seams. To him, curiosity was one river split into many streams that still fed the same sea. Here is the final twist. The greatest machine he invented wasn't the tank or the flying screw. It was a machine inside the mind, a method for looking. See the world, draw it until your hand knows it. Model it until your fingers feel its weight. Break it, remake it, ask it questions. Make mistakes on purpose and learn why they're mistakes. Be shamelessly greedy for knowledge that does not fit into the boxes your time gives you. He wrote that science is the captain and practice the soldiers. He lived that line with ink-stained fingers. Free the Leonardo da Vinci's legacy is not just in the masterpieces we hang on walls or the sketches we frame in museums. It's in the chain reaction of possibility. His pages still trigger. Every time a student traces the arc of a wing and then glances at a rotor. Every time a surgeon thinks like an engineer because he taught us that the heart is a valve and a pump and that flow has shapes. Every time an artist redraws a gear tooth and then paints a cloud that feels like it might move. He gives us permission to be bigger than our job description. So when you stand in front of the Mona Lisa and watch her almost smile, remember what glows beyond the frame. Picture the armored car parked in a Milanese workshop, the robot knight waiting behind a velvet curtain, the helical screw poised like a question mark on a bench, the old man's heart mapped in spirals and currents, a linen parachute neatly folded beside a tower. He was building a future that could not survive in his century. We live in it now. He did not change history in the ways he might have if his machines had rolled and flown, but he changed what history thinks is possible, and that may be the greater power. The real mystery of Leonardo is not what he kept hidden. It's how much of him we still haven't learned to see. Look beyond the masterpieces. Follow the ink. The revolution he began in the margins is still waiting for us to finish it.